back in Nigeria, the central bank has reverted back to 30% of the MPR, the rate that commercial banks should pay their customers for savings deposits. The previous savings deposit rate was lowered to 10% a few years ago by the financial regulator. So my question is, what is changing? My guest on this is Joshua Odebisi, is the head of banking research analysis at Vertiva Capital Management. Good to see you, Joshua.
Yeah,
thanks for coming. Appreciate that all the time. So this looks like some good news, but give me further details on this directive. What more do you know?
Well, as you understand, it's 30% of the monetary policy rate, which comes to about 4.2%.
At the current MPR?
Yeah, at the current MPR. Now, that's also a very interesting point because we know that there will be another monetary policy meeting next month. So if the rate goes up, then there will be a further increase in the rates for savings on your normal savings accounts. Obviously, this has a bit of a negative impact because the banks have to pay interest on most of their savings. But although it's just a low cost, really.
4%?
Yeah, 4.2% at the moment.
4.2% for savings?
Yeah.
How's that news being received in the banking system?
Well, on the one hand, I think it's to be expected. We know that cost of funds have been down since about 2020, just due to the fact that we needed to sort of jumpstart the economy. And so it was meant to discourage people from saving too much and put money back into the economy. Same reason why cost of borrowing was so low for so long as well, is just to try and stimulate growth in the economy. Now we're getting to a point...
Get folks to spend.
Exactly, but we're getting to a point where, unfortunately, inflation is out of control. Or is
too much money in circulation.
Absolutely. So we're getting up to close to 20%, and the CBN is pulling the levers that they have at their disposal to try and bring that down. And this is just one of them.
It's just one of those tools trying to take a bit of the money out on the streets back into the vaults of the banks. And that goes all the way to cash reserve ratio, isn't it?
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, the cash reserve ratio. So what this possibly means, or what in theory is supposed to happen, is that the banks are supposed to get more money from us because it's a more attractive rate. Yes. And so they should have more money in their purse, but at the same time, the CBN will then come in and mop it up. Yes. Exactly, and so there should be less money in circulation. But unfortunately, I don't think that 4.2% is going to be that enticing, simply due to the fact that inflation is still 20%, and nobody is looking at 4% return and thinking this is a good idea in terms of real return. Your money is still losing value even when you put it into the bank at that rate.
Average, what do you think could be an attractive deposit rate, by the way? Do people really care in this environment about deposit rate? Unless you're Nigerian breweries or you're Dangote Cement or Boa Cement, by the way.
Absolutely, but those guys get to negotiate with the banks, and so they don't get the same rates that we, the normal consumers, would get.
With the banks?
With the banks. So I don't think that the ordinary citizen really cares that much because the amount is very, very minimal. Even when you see that interest payment, if you ever see it on your bank statement, it's always just a few naira and a few kobo. So nobody's really paying that much attention to it. It's until you get close to, basically replacing your money at the rate of inflation, then you can start to get excited about something like that. But that will never happen.
19%?
Of course not. It's not possible. Yeah,
it's not going to happen.
Sure.
No banks in Nigeria will be able to pay 19%, close to 20% on deposit. No, I'm not sure current accounts will get that much.
Of course not. So obviously, a bank would go out of business almost instantly if they started paying out that amount of money because they have to manage their cost of funds quite well. Their yield on assets is always around 12, 13, 14% for the big banks and a lot lower for the smaller banks. So they're never going to be able to pay out such high amounts for their deposits, which they are basically using to run their operations.
Is the cost of funds really so high in Nigeria?
Well, it hasn't been for quite some time. Like I said, since 2020, we saw pretty low cost of funds or a declining cost of funds in 2020, very low in 2021, which helped net interest margins, which kept the banks in the green. So now there's just going to be a bit of a reversal. But at the same time, you have to realize that MPR has gone up, so they're going to be charging more on their loans as well.
So when the central bank lowered that from 30% to 10%, we didn't hear much. So the banks have had 2 years in the middle of enjoying those rates again. Now it's back to 30%. If central bank keeps raising rates, which is most likely to happen in the short term, is it?
Absolutely. So like we said, if inflation stays high, the MPC is probably going to move to raise rates again, maybe by another 100 basis points, who knows? And then that would obviously translate to higher savings rates, savings deposit rates. So at that point, cost of funds is going to become a bit more precarious, and it's going to start to play a bigger role because it's going to start to affect net interest margins.
But is 4.2% so high for banks to pay?
Well, you're thinking about it on the smaller side of it.
Yes.
But once you start getting into the trillions, which a lot of the big banks have in terms of deposits.
In terms of deposit, okay.
It can start
that's
to
where
add
I'm
up.
going, because
Yeah.
it goes into trillions.
Absolutely.
The GT, the Zenith, the Access, right, the UBA.
Yeah, no, so the thing is, a lot of those banks you called will pride themselves or have prided themselves on keeping their cost of funds very low.
Yes.
They have a very good CASA mix, well above 80%, but they're still paying out a little bit of interest on most of their deposits. At this point, it starts to become more of a factor just in terms of just your net interest margin and your...
So what's the real problem, really, that makes it almost impossible for ordinary bank depositors in Nigeria with the savings current account to get real return on them? Is it just about inflation, or just that the environment itself, or there's no patient capital, patient money in the bank, in the vaults?
Well, I mean, there are a few reasons, but if you think about it, it's the reason why investments and investment banking exists is that you don't want to just keep your money in the bank if you can help it. If you can avoid it, you want that money to earn more money for you.
So put it in a managed funds, for example.
Yeah,
buy stocks, buy bonds.
Exactly. So that's part of the reason why the rate has been so low for so long, is the fact that we just want to keep people investing in the real economy to grow continually.
Yeah. But right now, it looks like that's not seem to be happening.
Unfortunately, economic factors, macroeconomic factors are against us in that sense. But in theory, that's what it's supposed to do. Like we said, these are just the levers that the CBN has at their disposal. Unfortunately, they can't come to you and force you to not spend your money and put it, keep it in a bank, or do something else like invest it long-term, buy bonds, buy stocks, whatever it is. Just keep that money out of the economy. They can't force you to do it. They can only make it more enticing.
Yeah, we can't take so much more currency out of circulation.
Well, I mean, you'd be surprised. The truth is that at this point, it's become a bit of a necessity for a lot of reasons, due to the fact that there's a lot of speculation, as you can imagine, on foreign currency. And so that's another thing that the CBN is trying to combat. And they're going about it in very different ways. But this is also one of the more traditional ways you can fight that.
I'm sure you've gotten make a few calls to the banks since this was announced. Are they happy?
Well, I mean, like we mentioned, it's just a fact of life that at some point, cost of funds were higher and the banks survived. They were still growing at a pretty reasonable rate,
yes,
although macros were more favorable then. So this is just a bit of a different scenario that they're going to have to find their way around.
They've been through it before. So will anything change if you try to extrapolate from where we are right now, maybe for the next half year into full year 2022 earnings? Do you think it will make any dents whatsoever?
It comes into effect at the start of August. On the 1st of August. So you can say that probably you're going to start to see a bit of an effect in Q3, but definitely Q4 results will start to reflect that more generally. But I think H1, maybe a lot of the banks would have got front-loaded a lot of their profits, so maybe they'll be able to have a bit of a cushion for the second half. But by next year, you can expect it.
We can see the full exposure on that. Okay. Well, thank you for those insights as always. Joshua Odebisi, Head Banking Research Analysis at Vetivo Capital Management.